I've been talking with you in the last couple weeks about this faith that I've been praying for, and God's been tackling it in different ways. So, one of the things that I said to you in a video last night is that you can't just tackle faith like head on as though you're going to control having faith. Faith is something that's lived, and it's lived in many different ways. For example, when God convicted me that I needed to give up the careers that I had, that they were not of Him, that He would take care of me, that He was doing a new thing, I have to trust, because it's not like He gives me the manna up front. It's not like He tells me up front where He's taking me. He takes me somewhere each and every day. And so there's a process, and there are many components of lived faith. You know, that's going to tie into my feelings of living in poverty, living on the street, wondering if I've gone bananas and have made the wrong decision. Am I really hearing from God? Right? And so living that faith means that I have to stay really close to Him. And I have to stay really close to Him so that those doubts don't have any room to sneak back in. So that the fear that I feel causes me to get in even deeper with Him. And that if I start to succumb to that fear and I start to allow the enemy to bring me into behaviors, old behaviors, flesh behaviors, such as distraction or trying to control situations or trying to reason through, which is a form of control. For example, a lot of people end up cooking up ministries and making a business of ministries and then saying that God did that God told them to do that, when in fact, much of what they're doing is in opposition to Him, does not have His truth, does not have His wisdom. They're not being moved by Him. They've cooked something up in their flesh because they've been pulled back into their flesh. They're not living faith. They're living a counterfeit, made up faith and ministry that has been cooked up in their flesh. So there's something that God is dealing with me on today. And there are a couple of components that I want to address in this video. There are a couple of things that I notice that happen with people, places that they get stuck. They get stuck on the shepherding of their inner parent, and they also get stuck on whether or not they're going to be able to do this thing that God is calling them to do. And I hear a lot of times that people get stuck in this shame and concern. And a lot of times that concern turns into fear, and then it causes them to go back into their flesh. So I want to talk about how this is looking for me today in the work that He's calling me to address, this other aspect of faith. And hopefully it's going to answer some questions, or at least give an example of how to address the shepherding component, and also this fear that comes up of, will I be able to do this? And how? How do I do this? I had this situation when I was growing up where I was living at my dad's house. He took custody of us, and I would visit my mother every other weekend. And even as I say that, I know it should never have been like that. It should never have been that way. No child should ever be away from their mother, or their father for that matter, but this is how it was. And we were starving at my dad's house. He had no concept of what anyone else needed but himself. And so when we would go to my mom's house every other weekend, my mother would give us, she had all kinds of, really junk food treats, treats in a box. And anything that comes from a box probably isn't food. So that by the time I got to my mom's, I was trying to make up for 2 weeks of not eating. And it was a real confusion, right? Because you go from not eating anything, or, we ate some things, but being malnourished, to now this mindset where you're totally in your flesh and you've just got this ravenous appetite where you're eating just things that your flesh wants. There was no balance there. There was no reasonable, healthy meal. Total restriction, and then just completely let loose with the flesh. The other thing that I would do when I would go to my mother's is, we never watched TV at my dad's house. He controlled every single thing that we did and every place we were. I never had a bedroom. I had absolutely nothing of my own. He knew where we were at all times, and usually had us busy doing something for him, some kind of manual labor. Or he threw us in a corner for days, like he would make us stand in a corner for days. So fear and terror all the time. And so going to my mother's house every other weekend represented a haven of sorts. And what I would do is I would completely numb out because I didn't know how to eat healthy food. I didn't know any kind of balance, a healthy way of relating with the design that God had given me. I didn't know how to talk about what was going on inside of me. No one was talking to me about what was going on. And so when I would go there, I would eat, I would sit in front of Nintendo, or I would watch TV. Everything to numb out. Total and utter chaos inside of me because I needed my mother, but I didn't know I needed my mother, and I had no way of articulating it. And that's part of what we're doing in the inner child work, because even though you may not have experienced what I experienced, you experienced a version of it in the sense that you needed someone to draw out of you, how are you feeling? What's it like for you when you're here? What's it like for you when you're at dad's? Helping you to understand the design that God has given you and what your feelings actually mean. And I know that you experienced a version of that because I've worked with many, many people who were in that same position. And also because the very field that claims to help us to understand does not itself understand. And so that's going to leak into the culture and the world because that's the authority on whom they rely. That's what you're doing with your inner child during the witnessing process. You're helping them to have a place to be able to talk, to be able to express what they're feeling. But you have to remember that when that child comes home to you from that horribly abusive situation, whatever it is, he or she does not know how to talk. He or she is not going to readily start telling you what's going on inside of them. You need to draw that out. Otherwise, what they are going to do is they're going to go grab the fruit roll-ups and the golden grams, and they're going to sit in front of Nintendo, and they're going to sit in front of technology, and they are going to distract themselves from what they're feeling inside because it's too intolerable, it's too painful, and they don't know what to do with it. And they don't understand their design. They don't realize that what's happening is that they're living in the flesh, and now they're getting attacked even more. And that the very thing that they need to do is to be able to get into the heart and spirit, have a relationship with themselves by understanding what's going on in their design, what they're feeling in their design, and to be able to put this pain and grief to a voice so that someone somewhere can do something about this. If you don't know what's going on with your inner child, how can you ever do anything about it? They hold the wisdom, but they don't know what to do with it. They hold the wisdom because they know how you're feeling. They can tell you how they're feeling. Your job as the inner parent is to respond to that. So let me tell you what this did. I lived in the flesh in total vigilance and fear all the time at my dad's house. By the time I got to my mom's house, I had a haven that had been made for me because my mom knew to some extent that we were in pain. But my mom also didn't relate with herself, so she didn't know how to do that with her children. She too was wounded, so she took care of us by feeding us the food that she knew we weren't getting at my dad's. She took care of us by just letting us be kids, is what she thought she was doing. Just let them play. I'm not going to put any more burdens on them because I know that they have enough burdens at their dad's house. And so she was overcompensating rather than being the parent that we needed. So what we went from was one extreme to another extreme, but both of them being one and the same in terms of causing us to learn to always live in our flesh, to always live in fear, or to live in total indulgence. It's a very dangerous combination, and you never learn how to live in the heart and spirit. You never actually feel peace. You might feel some relief when you're in that haven, but you never actually get to that place of feeling peace. And so you learn that life is just about compulsion. You learn to get comfortable with those spirits that are compelling you to either live in fear, and that's your motivator, vigilance, that's how you control everything, indulgence, That's how you give yourself a break. Most of the time, you're frozen and trying to control everything or trying to run away from everything. And then when you can't take it anymore, you just overindulge. So if any of this or aspects of this are feeling familiar to you, they should be, because this is the way that people live. It's not just me, given the severe environments that I grew up in. It's you too, because I've worked with people and I see this. And sometimes it can be even more difficult to identify the fear that you're living in, because you may not realize it because there's no like immediate danger or threat, or, maybe you didn't have that severe environment, but there was indeed covert tension, aggression, and fear in the home. Maybe there were fights about money. Maybe there was pain from infidelity. All of these things that people are just not talking about. Maybe there's some unspoken pain from the addiction of a family member who's being harassed by a spirit, and now everybody else in the family is being harassed by that same spirit. Maybe there's pain from people who are emotionally cut off or have not resolved from past wounds. And those things can eat away at you too. And sometimes it can be even more confusing because nothing's being said or identified. Maybe there are self-centered people, like your physical needs, your basic needs are met. They might even be met in abundance, or you might even be overindulged, but there's a complete absence of love. Or that there are certain things expected of you in order for you to be thrown a bone that people call love. Whatever the situation is, your child, that child part of you, needs a way to express it. They need you as the inner parent to bring it out of them. That's part of the witnessing. So you're facilitating and helping them to have a voice. And in order to do that, do you think that it would have been helpful if I was sitting there playing Nintendo, eating my fruit roll-up, and my mother was sitting there trying to talk to me? No, I had to be removed from all of that distraction. That needs to not be my life, because that's the thing that I'm going to run to because it's easy and it doesn't require me to feel any pain. You've got to create an environment for that to happen. So if you've got your inner child jacked up all day on distraction, and then you want them to come and do some inner child work with you, it's not going to happen. She wants to run back to the Nintendo. She's going to tell you what you need to hear for the moment because you're inconveniencing her. And then she's going to run back to the Nintendo where it's easy and she doesn't have to feel the pain. The problem is you keep stuffing it down and stuffing it down. It becomes a very chaotic and confusing internal world that you're carrying around with you. And now that inner child and all of her pain is dictating what you do in your life, and you don't even realize it. So people tend to be a little better at the witnessing part, and then when it comes to shepherding, they're not so good at it. Or maybe they feel relief from the witnessing, and then they forget the shepherding part, or they leave it out, or they do the shepherding in such a way that was done to them, like in a robotic, do this and do that. So I want to explain what shepherding is. Well, first of all, let me just say that part of the witnessing is reflecting and responding to what your child has said and helping him or her to bring the picture together. Well, yeah, I get why you feel that way, because when we were going through this, it was really scary. Or, you're putting the pieces together that a child cannot put together. A child just says, this is what I feel. I miss my mom. I want to be with my mom. I want to feel close to my mom. It's confusing to me that I'm being forced to hate her. And so I come over here and she's being so loving to me. And I know that she's done all of this. She's collected all of this food, even though it's terrible for me. But she's collected all of this food and she's made an environment and she's celebrating that I'm home. But I'm being forced to not love her. I'm being forced to hate someone who is giving all of this to me, and it's super confusing and it hurts me so much. I just want permission to love her. I just want permission to not hurt her, to not ignore her, to not have to be indifferent to her. So your inner parent needs to respond to those things. And in responding, helping your inner child to understand, of course you feel that way. It was impossible. We were so terrified of Dad. He seemed to have all of the power. And yet you didn't want to lose him either. It was so confusing. And all of those promises that he made about how life was going to be and that this was the righteous way, even though it was hard, it was the righteous thing to do for you to live with him. That's what God expected, and that mom was bad. So you see how you're bringing together the story and helping your child to understand you didn't just make these decisions of yourself. These are the reasons you were feeling that way. Of course you felt that way. You're mirroring them. You're validating. Yes, that's what happened. That's what was going on. Now, when you're shepherding, what you're helping your child to understand is what God is doing. What's God doing in this situation? Because nothing you've experienced. And so here's where faith, part of your faith and your understanding is coming in. We know that God doesn't do, and so your parent, your inner parent can say these things. We know that everything has been done for a reason, that God is doing something here, that he is building even in the worst situations, especially in the worst situations, he's building part of your lampstand. What's he doing here? What has he taught you thus far? And look, one of the things that he's taught me is how the enemy works, that he's going to do anything and everything to keep you in your flesh so that you never have a personal relationship, and you never have a relationship with God. If you don't have a personal relationship, if you can't attune yourself even to your body, get in your heart and spirit, to your feelings, your design, how are you ever going to hear God? As long as he keeps you jacked up in the flesh and compelled to, go on technology, because you know what this resulted in. If you're a child who's playing Nintendo with a bowl of Golden Grams and a fruit roll-up, and you're all jacked up on sugar and you're living for the indulgences of the flesh, totally disconnected from the design that God gave you. God didn't plant us here with Nintendo and sugary treats. If that's how you're living, then you grow into an adult who's not connected whatsoever, who's not able to have real relationships, who treats themselves like a machine, who's definitely feeling things inside, but is chaotic and acting out like a child, and it makes no sense because they're in an adult body. You're going to freeze in front of your technology. You may even feel things like you want to hear from God, you want to be connected, and you create different experiences in the flesh where you're claiming that you're hearing from God, but you're not. You're cooking it up. Because the truth is, you don't even know what it is to hear from God. You just have ideas that you think are godly. You just have ideas that you think are the ministry that he wants you in. But from personal experience and what's written in the Bible is that he is going to move you to follow his laws and be careful to keep his decrees. He is going to move you by his spirit and build you by his spirit through that healing process as a result of returning to him. And there's not going to be any question about what you're doing, where it came from. And it's definitely not going to be something that you made up. It's going to be something that requires you to stay real close to him every day. And you're going to see the ways that he keeps you close to him on a daily basis. So understanding how this all comes together is really important. That's that shepherding piece. What do you think God's doing? What is God calling us to do in this situation? What does his word say? You don't need to impose it on the child. Ask the child. They're smarter than you think. In fact, in many ways, they're smarter than we are, than the adult is, because they're capable of being teachable. They're capable of wrapping their hearts around what God wants. Remember that he reveals these things to little children, including that child part of you. That's the reason you've got to become like a child. The other part that I'm hearing is difficult for people is, why am I going in and out, or why am I experiencing this block? So here's what I want you to understand. If you're just feeling a block, like your child is digging their heels in and they're scared, then you need to ask the child, what are you feeling right now? A lot of times they're feeling scared and they need to process the fear about moving forward or getting deeper. There's a reason why I didn't learn how to process my feelings as an adult. I didn't learn how to do that because I didn't learn how to do it as a child. totally disconnected from my design, which, by the way, is going to lend itself to superficial relationships, addictions, and just living in the flesh. Constantly compelled by a spirit of fear to live for the world, to perform for the world, to be a machine. Hence the reason I built 3 businesses after both my parents died. It was like, what do you do with everything that's inside of you? You got to do something with that fearful, anxious energy. So you go build 3 businesses, compelled by a spirit of fear. And of course, I would end up in a field that was not of God, that was of Satan, because that's the spirit by which I was living. That's the flesh by which I was cooking things up and thinking that I was doing good, truly wanting to help people, truly wanting answers for myself, but I never got them. So you can have the best of intentions while you're cooking up a ministry, but it doesn't mean it's from God, and it doesn't mean it's true or good. There's a reason why I wasn't connected to my own design and my own feelings. And so now, as an adult, when I'm asking my inner child about certain things, there are a couple things that I'm contending with. One is that she's afraid. She's afraid because she's never opened that box before. And there's a lot of chaos still. And, when you have like someone who has died and you're feeling grief, you can say, okay, well, you give yourself a little more permission to feel those feelings. When you have a box of feelings that's 40 years old and has been, just collected over that time, it's really hard to open that box and sort out what goes with what. It's a little difficult to give yourself permission to feel things that don't necessarily belong in a 44-year-old body or a 44-year-old, expression of emotion, right? And that's part of what you're dealing with the child, is you're bringing things up that are being felt like a child because they happened when you were a child. So not only does your child have that feeling, but she's also got feelings about the feelings. But I don't know how to feel that. I don't know how to feel the feelings of wanting my mom in the way that I wanted my mom as a child. The way I want her as an adult is not the same that a child needs their mother, because you have different developmental dependency needs as a child than you do as an adult. And so if I'm feeling that as a child, I need to be a part of her. That's a childhood need. I need to be a part of her. I need that symbiotic relationship that was stolen, that was ripped from me, where I was forced to go against my very design and the things that God gave me in order to appease a demonically attacked individual who had no love and no regard for his own child. So I might be digging in my heels. I might be hiding out in a corner, because I'm afraid of opening that, because I don't know how to do it yet. And what will happen inside of me is that I'm going to start feeling compelled. I'm going to start feeling like I need to go check my email. I need to go check my, whatever it is. You know what? I'm hungry. I need to go fix myself something to eat. You know what? I need to go clean my bathroom. You see what I'm saying? You might start to get distracted and pulled back into your flesh, but you need to recognize what's happening there. You're not preoccupied. You're not, it's not you. It's Satan. He's afraid that he's going to let go, that he's going to lose control over you. He's going to lose that stronghold that he's had over you. The other thing that's happening is that your child has feelings about opening up that box. So you need to process the feelings. And you also, if this is a stronghold, if this is a spirit, if you are finding that you're so compelled, then this is going to take a minute, and you need to recognize that. You might just need to say, you know what, I've got to do a fast. I have to do a fast, and I have to separate from these things that I've been distracting myself with. I got to put my laptop up in my closet. I need to, usually what I do when I'm going to do a fast is I make a pot of soup, and then I just have a very basic meal, nothing that's going to get my flesh activated, like sugar. And I will eat from 12 to 4, and I will fast the rest of the day, because I need to get my body back into discipline. I need to get my mind back into discipline. I'm going to have to go on my laptop at some point. I'm going to have to check things and, do basic business. But if I have been using my technology to escape and distract and I've been using food to escape and distract or anything else. It's got to go. I have to circumcise from the sinful desires that are causing me to do that. And I need to get my mind and body back into discipline. My physical flesh need to be disciplined. My sinful flesh needs to be completely cut off. And I need to get into my heart and spirit. I've got to discipline my soul into its proper position. The other thing that I hear coming up in certain people is, will I be able to do this? So you've done your witnessing work, you've done your shepherding work, and you're still just feeling uneasy. You've decided you're going to do a fast. You're noticing that maybe there's a spirit, maybe this is a stronghold, that maybe I just need to get in deeper with God, whatever it is. But now you're starting to feel these feelings of, this feels so big. It feels so overwhelming. I feel that way too, you guys. I feel that way as well. But the thing that I know is that, no, I won't be able to do it. It's not me that's going to do it. It's me that's going to believe that God will do this as long as I take these certain actions that he requires. If you do these things, you're going to know that the things that Christ said are from God. You're going to know that he is from God, right? If you do these things, if you're circumcising from the sinful flesh, disciplining the physical flesh, getting into the heart and spirit, because God is spirit, he communicates with your spirit, and he was placed in your heart when you became a new creation. If you do these things instead of just listening to them and regurgitating them with your lips and holding them up in your carnality, but never actually living into them, which is faith, if you do these things, you're going to experience the fruit, the results. And then you're going to know that what Jesus talked about was the message of the Father. Then you're going to know that the things that I'm talking about, that I'm living out, that I'm offered up for you, that Jesus was offered up for you, that the apostles and the prophets were offered up for you in order to teach you, you're going to know because you're going to experience it. So the question, will I be able to do this? I just want to acknowledge that all of us have that question because it is very overwhelming. And yet the truth of the matter is, none of us can do any of this without him. You're not the one doing it. He will be the one who is going to heal it. He will be the one who's going to move you and guide you. What you are responsible for doing is your part in that, and also following his spirit, following his lead. And if you don't do that, if you don't stay close to his spirit, because all of these things that I'm talking about are intended to bring you in deeper to him. They're intended to bring you into relationship with him. When you start removing the distraction, if I had removed the fruit roll-up, the Golden Grams, and the Nintendo, I would have had to actually sit with my feelings. I would have actually had to relate with my design. I would have been able to relate with my mother if she had been capable of doing that. And in doing that, in having, now relating with my design, now I'm open to being able to actually have a real relationship with God who is in my design. Now I'm able to have a real relationship with others because I'm actually a connected soul. Whereas before, I was a fragmented soul living in my flesh. And when you're in the flesh, you're going to live according to those flesh desires, and you're going to live according to the world. You're going to be deceived. You're going to be stolen, killed, or destroyed. That's all that ever results in. The last thing I want to talk about is receiving his ministry, because I write that in Heart Known series. And, there's a reason why there's not instructions there, but or many instructions regarding receiving his ministry. Because how do you give instructions for that? I mean, it's implied. You need to return to God now. Now you're in the proper posture. You've done your part to evaluate and to process through the feelings and to relate with your design. Now you need to bring yourself to him correctly, because most of us, prior to doing that work, if not all of us, we're bringing ourselves in our flesh. So now that you have examined your feelings, examined your sin that resulted. I mean, there was sin that resulted. Yeah, it wasn't my fault, but there was still sin that resulted. I lived in the flesh. I've been distracting for many years. So all of this is intended to bring you into a posture of repentance and personal examination so that you can then bring yourself to him correctly. Otherwise, the way that you bring yourself to him is as a victim, as a martyr. None of these things should have happened to me. Look what you brought on me. Rather than the posture of he's doing something here, now let me receive it. What is God teaching me? When you're bringing yourself to God to receive his ministry, the question that I ask is, okay, Lord, I've done this part. Is there anything that you want to teach me? Is there anything that you want to minister to me to bring together this picture of what you're doing? You may not always hear from him in that moment. You might just be feeling a feeling of peace, maybe even a feeling of sleepiness, and realizing that it's time for you to go rest. It's time for you to go rest in him. So it's not that he's not talking to you. You need to perceive the way that he's talking to you. Sometimes that's what he's telling me. You need to go rest now. In order to rest, I have to rest in him. When people talk about insomnia, fundamentally, what is going on is that they are not resting in him. That's why they're not able to get to a place of rest and peace, because everything has a spiritual etiology. The underlying cause is always spiritual. So when you actually do feel sleepy, when you're feeling that feeling of peace, even though you may know that this is not totally resolved, you may know that now you got to do the fasting. Now you've got to do the circumcising. Now you've got to do the work in order for the stronghold to break and that spirit to be cast out. Or you got to do the work to get in deeper with him. But just because he's not speaking to your spirit right now, you need to perceive the other ways that he's talking. The other thing that I want to say is you need to make sure that you're in the heart and spirit. You need to make sure that you have dropped from that carnality that gets you all jacked up, especially when you're processing a deep root, something that is intensely painful and has, been a major stronghold in your life. You need to make sure that you're in the heart and spirit, or you won't hear him and you will not be able to receive from him. If you're having difficulty doing that, you may need to spend some more time talking with your inner child about how he or she is feeling. If you're still having more difficulty doing that, like you're still feeling like something keeps pulling you into the flesh, it's likely a spirit. In this case, start your fast. And a lot of people, they think they've got to prepare for a fast. Like it's got to be like days that they're preparing and they're setting aside this time. Just do it. Just do the fast. And then if you need to do something deeper, then you can do something deeper. But just do it. You don't need to set aside that time. And if it's such a difficult thing for you to enter into, you need to take a look at that. You need to take a look at why, because that to me is telling me that you've got a lot of idols in your life. You're taking care of children. By the way, children who need to be taken care of. I know a lot of people who take care of their adult children and their spouses, and they have difficulty making time for themselves, making time for others, and making time for God because they're too busy setting them up as idols. You can't be doing that. There should be no problem with you saying to your spouse or your adult children, hey, I'm not going to be cooking dinner for the next, 3 days. You guys are going to need to do something. I'm doing something for myself. If you have young children, there's no problem with you sitting and talking with your young children about a plan, collaborating with them and letting them know, hey, this is what I'm doing with God. And in order for me to do this, this is what I need. Not that they have to take care of themselves, but how do you think we can, here's the plan I'm thinking of. What do you think about that? Can you help mommy? Can you help daddy so that I can take some time to do this? That's good modeling for your children. There's nothing wrong with that. Make something that you can heat up for your kids. Make a casserole, make a pot of soup. But if you're finding that that's difficult, then you need to examine the idols, just how many idols you have, just how busy you are in your life, and that you might be setting yourself up as a machine for the world. That might be the way that you're living. So keep checking in with yourself as you're doing the work, as you're talking with God, as you're talking with your inner child. You cannot do this work in your carnality. If you do it in your carnality, it will completely be in vain. You absolutely must be brought into the heart and spirit in order to do this work. And most importantly, in order to hear from God, in order to have a relationship, a personal relationship, and in order to have a relationship with Him. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section. If it's, a little bit more personal, you're welcome to email me. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.